The Incas built the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. They created roads through impossible mountains. They farmed on vertical cliffs. They moved massive stones without wheels. They governed millions without writing. In just 100 years, they rose from a small tribe to rulers of the western coast of South America. This is their complete story. Long before the Incas claimed their destiny, the Andean highlands breathed with ancient life. The mountains stood eternal. The valleys carved deep channels through stone. Rivers ran cold from glacier peaks. This land shaped civilizations for thousands of years. The geography itself was extraordinary. The Andes Mountains stretch like a spine along South America's western edge. These peaks rise higher than most clouds. Some reach over 20,000 feet into the sky. The air grows thin at these heights. Breathing becomes difficult. The human body must adapt slowly. Yet people chose to live here. They built their homes on these impossible slopes. Between the mountains lay fertile valleys. These pockets of green provided refuge from harsh peaks. Rivers carved these valleys over millions of years. The soil accumulated deep and rich. Maize grew tall in protected fields. Potatoes thrived in the cool climate. These valleys would become the heartland of empire. The coast presented another world entirely. The desert stretched along the Pacific Ocean. Rain almost never fell here. The Humboldt Current brought cold water north from Antarctica. This created one of the driest places on Earth. Yet river valleys cut through the desert. These ribbons of green supported dense populations. Ancient peoples learned to channel precious water. They built extensive irrigation systems. The desert bloomed where water touched sand. To the east lay the Amazon rainforest. This green wall of vegetation marked the empire's eventual boundary. The jungle was alien to highland peoples. The heat pressed down like a weight. Moisture filled every breath. Strange diseases lurked in stagnant water. Poisonous creatures hid in the undergrowth. The Incas would probe this frontier but never conquer it completely. Climate shaped everything in this vertical world. Temperature changed with elevation, not season. A person could walk from tropical heat to Arctic cold in a single day, just by climbing a mountain slope. Each elevation zone supported different crops. Different animals grazed at various heights. This vertical archipelago created unique opportunities. It also posed incredible challenges. The ancient peoples before the Incas understood these challenges well. The Chivan culture arose 3,000 years ago. They built elaborate temples in mountain valleys. Their stone carvings depicted fierce gods. Jaguars and serpents decorated their walls. They developed religious ideas that would echo through time. Their influence spread across northern Peru. Trade networks connected distant communities. Ideas flowed along mountain paths. The Moche civilization dominated the northern coast. They built massive adobe pyramids. Their pottery depicted elaborate scenes of daily life. Warriors fought in ceremonial combat. Priests performed blood sacrifices. Farmers tended their fields. The Moche were master metalworkers. They crafted golden ornaments of incredible beauty. Their irrigation systems transformed coastal valleys. Canals stretched for miles through the desert. The Nazca people etched giant lines across southern deserts. These geoglyphs depicted animals and geometric shapes. Some lines ran perfectly straight for miles. They could only be fully seen from the air. Their purpose remains mysterious. Perhaps they marked underground water sources. Maybe they served religious ceremonies. Or they might have been astronomical calendars. The Nazca also created beautiful textiles. Their weavings displayed complex patterns. Colors remained vibrant after centuries in dry tombs. Tiwanaku arose near Lake Titicaca. This city sat at 12,000 feet elevation. The lake provided fish and water birds. Reed boats crossed its cold waters. Tiwanaku's builders moved massive stone blocks. Some weighed over 100 tons. They carved precise joints without metal tools. Their city influenced cultures across the southern Andes. Religious symbols spread far from the lake. The gateway god image appeared everywhere. This figure would later influence Inca religion. The warrior empire expanded from the central highlands. They were contemporary with Tiwanaku. These two powers may have competed for influence. or perhaps they coexisted peacefully. The evidence remains unclear. Wari built impressive cities across Peru. They constructed extensive road networks. These highways would later serve the Incas. Wari developed administrative techniques. They organized conquered territories efficiently. Their methods provided models for future empires. The Chimu kingdom controlled the northern coast. They built Chan Chan, an enormous adobe city. Its walls stretched for miles. Elaborate friezes decorated royal compounds. The Chimu were master engineers. They constructed an irrigation canal 70 miles long. This brought water from distant mountains. Their metalworkers created exquisite pieces. Golden ceremonial knives gleamed in the sun. They would become the Incas' greatest rivals. Each culture contributed to Andean civilization. Agricultural techniques accumulated over centuries. Farmers learned to read Wemialda weather signs. They knew when to plant each crop. They understood how to preserve food. Freeze-drying potatoes created chuño. This could last for years without spoiling. Corn was dried and stored in clay jars. These methods ensured survival through bad harvests. Textile technology reached incredible sophistication. Weavers created cloth finer than silk. They used cotton from the coast. Alpaca wool came from the highlands. Vicuña fiber was reserved for nobility. Natural dyes produced brilliant colors. Red came from cochineal insects. Purple derived from sea snails. Yellow emerged from certain plants. Patterns encoded complex information. Textiles served as status symbols. They also functioned as historical records. Metallurgy advanced through generations. Smiths learned to alloy copper with tin. This created bronze harder than pure copper. They discovered how to work gold and silver. Sheets could be hammered incredibly thin. Complex shapes were cast using lost wax methods. Metals were more than decorative. Bronze tools aided construction. Copper implements improved agriculture. Stoneworking achieved remarkable precision. Masons shaped granite without iron tools. They used harder stones to pound and grind. Water and sand helped cut through rock. Wooden wedges split stones along natural grain. Surfaces were polished to mirror smoothness. Joints fit so tightly that knife blades couldn't enter. This technology would reach its peak with the Incas. Religious concepts evolved through cultural exchange. The staff god appeared in various forms. Sky deities controlled weather and crops. Earth goddesses ensured fertility. Mountain spirits demanded respect. Ancestor worship connected past and present. The dead were carefully preserved. Mummies participated in important ceremonies. They owned property and received offerings. This reverence for ancestors would become central to Inca belief. Political organization grew more complex over time. Simple villages expanded into chiefdoms. Chiefdoms consolidated into kingdoms. Kingdoms battled for regional dominance. Leaders claimed divine descent. They controlled religious ceremonies. Military success demonstrated supernatural favor. Defeated enemies became tributary subjects. Their labor and goods enriched victors. These patterns of conquest and incorporation would define the Inca approach. Trade networks linked diverse regions. Coastal peoples needed highland products. Mountain dwellers desired coastal goods. Caravans of llamas crossed high passes. They carried dried fish from the ocean. They brought potatoes from cold highlands. Tropical feathers arrived from eastern forests. Shells traveled incredible distances. Spondylus shells from Ecuador were especially prized. They served as offerings in religious ceremonies. Languages proliferated across the Andes. Hundreds of distinct tongues were spoken. Each valley might have its own dialect. This linguistic diversity reflected political fragmentation. No single power had united the entire region. The Incas would later impose Quechua as an official language, but they never eliminated local languages completely. Social stratification became increasingly pronounced. Elites controlled the best land. They wore the finest textiles. They ate diverse foods from multiple zones. Common farmers worked assigned plots. They owed labor service to nobles. Craftspeople specialized in particular skills. Potters, weavers, and metalworkers formed distinct groups. Warriors gained status through conquest. Priests interpreted divine will. Warfare evolved from ritual combat to territorial expansion. Early conflicts were highly ceremonial. Champions fought in single combat. Battles followed strict rules. Casualties were often minimal. Over time, warfare became more destructive. Armies grew larger and better organized. Fortresses protected strategic locations. Weapons improved through technological innovation. Slings could kill at great distance. Bronze maces crushed skulls. Cotton armor deflected many weapons. Agricultural innovation continued relentlessly. Farmers built terraces on steep slopes. These platforms created flat planting surfaces. They prevented erosion during heavy rains. Stone walls retained heat at night. This protected crops from frost. Irrigation channels distributed water precisely. Different crops grew at specific elevations. Maize dominated warm valleys. Potatoes thrived in cool highlands. Quinoa survived at extreme altitudes. The concept of Aini governed social relations. This principle of reciprocity bound communities together. People helped neighbors during planting and harvest. The favor would be returned when needed. Leaders hosted feasts for subjects. Subjects provided labor for public works. This reciprocal obligation created social cohesion. It would become fundamental to Inca administration. Environmental challenges shaped cultural responses. Earthquakes regularly devastated settlements. Buildings were reconstructed with improved techniques. Walls learned to flex without collapsing. El Niño events brought catastrophic flooding. Communities developed early warning systems. They built overflow channels for excess water. Droughts could last for years. Food storage became critically important. Surplus from good years sustained bad ones. By the early 15th century, conditions were ripe for unification. Regional powers had demonstrated what was possible. Administrative techniques had been refined. Agricultural productivity had increased. Population density supported larger political units. Trade routes connected distant regions. Shared religious concepts provided common ground. Military technology enabled rapid conquest. Into this world stepped a small kingdom centered at Cusco. They called themselves the Incas. Initially they controlled only their immediate valley. Stronger neighbors surrounded them on all sides. No one could have predicted their explosive growth. Within 3 generations they would rule millions. Their empire would stretch 2,500 miles. From southern Colombia to central Chile, from the Pacific Ocean to Amazon rainforest. The stage was set for one of history's most remarkable transformations. The actors were in place. The script was about to unfold. The Inca drama would captivate the world. Even today, 5 centuries after their fall, we marvel at their achievements. We wonder how they built such an empire. We struggle to understand their rapid collapse. Their story contains triumphs and tragedies. Innovations and traditions, conquests and defeats. The Incas emerge from the mists of legend. Their origin stories blend history with mythology. Multiple versions existed simultaneously. Each tale served different purposes. Some legitimized political power, others explained natural phenomena. Together they created a rich narrative tradition. The most famous origin myth centered on Lake Titicaca. This vast body of water sits at incredible altitude. Its surface reflects the sky like a mirror. Islands dot its deep blue expanse. The lake had been sacred for millennia. Earlier cultures built temples on its shores. The Incas incorporated this ancient reverence into their own mythology. According to this tradition, the world began in darkness. Humans lived like animals in caves. They had no laws or customs. They didn't know how to farm. They couldn't weave cloth or build houses. They fought constantly among themselves. The creator god Viracocha took pity on them. He decided to send his children to bring civilization. Viracocha summoned his son Manco Capac and daughter Mama Oclo. Some versions say they were also husband and wife. He gave them a golden staff called Tupayari. This rod would indicate where to establish their kingdom. When the staff sank completely into the earth, they should stop traveling. That place would become the center of their empire. The divine siblings emerged from Lake Titicaca's sacred waters. They began walking north through the highlands. At each settlement they tested the ground. The golden staff bounced off rocky soil. It barely penetrated sandy areas. They continued their journey for many days. The landscape gradually changed as they travelled. They taught people as they wandered. Manco Capac instructed men in agriculture. He showed them how to irrigate fields. He demonstrated the proper way to plant maize. He explained when to harvest different crops. Mama Oklo taught women to spin thread. She showed them how to weave textiles. She demonstrated cooking techniques. She explained how to maintain households. Finally, they reached a beautiful valley. Mountains surrounded it on all sides. A river ran through fertile fields. The climate was mild and pleasant. When Manco Capac struck the ground, the golden staff disappeared completely. This was Cusco, the promised land. Here they would establish their kingdom. The local inhabitants initially resisted these strangers. But the divine siblings demonstrated supernatural powers. They could make water flow uphill. They could cause plants to grow instantly. They could speak with animals. The people recognized their divine nature. They accepted Manco Capac as their ruler. Mama Oklo became the first Koya, or queen. Another origin story involved 4 brothers and 4 sisters. They were called the Aya siblings. They emerged from a cave at Pacaritambo. This site lay about 20 miles from Cusco. Each sibling possessed different abilities. Together they would found the Inca nation. Aya Manco carried the golden staff. He would become Manco Capac, the first ruler. Aya Cachi possessed incredible strength. He could split mountains with his sling. Aya Uchu understood religious ceremonies. He would establish proper worship. Aya Auca was a skilled warrior. He would defend the new kingdom. The 4 sisters were equally important. Mama Oklo would become the first queen. Mama Huaco was a fierce warrior. She could throw spears with deadly accuracy. Mama Ipakura possessed healing knowledge. Mama Rawa understood agriculture and fertility. The 8 siblings began travelling toward Cusco. Along the way, jealousy arose among the brothers. Aya Cachi's strength frightened the others. He could destroy entire hillsides with single stones. His brothers feared he might claim sole leadership. They conspired to eliminate him. They told Aya Cachi about sacred objects left in the origin cave. They convinced him to retrieve these items. When he entered the cave, they sealed the entrance with massive boulders. Aya Cachi was trapped forever. His angry cries shook the mountains, but he could not escape his stone prison. The remaining siblings continued their journey. They established temporary settlements along the way. At each stop, some followers remained behind. These would become the various ethnic groups around Cusco. The main group pressed forward toward their destiny. At a place called Huanacauri, another transformation occurred. Ayaruchu decided to remain as a sacred huaca. He turned himself into stone. This rock would become one of the most important shrines in the empire. Young nobles would visit during initiation ceremonies. They would receive their first weapons there. Aya Auca flew ahead to scout the valley. He landed on the future site of Cusco. He marked the spot by turning into a boundary stone. This established the city's sacred perimeter. Only Aya Manco remained of the brothers. He took the name Manco Capac. With the 4 sisters he entered Cusco Valley. The local people, called Hualas, occupied the best land. Manco Capac's group had to negotiate for space. Some stories say they fought for control. Others describe peaceful coexistence. Eventually the Incas established themselves. They began the slow process of expansion. These mythical accounts encoded important information. They justified Inca rule through divine descent. They explained the sacred nature of specific places. They established the relationship between rulers and subjects. They provided models for proper behavior. They connected the Incas to ancient sacred sites. Archaeological evidence suggests more prosaic origins. The Cusco Valley was inhabited long before the Incas. Various ethnic groups competed for resources. The group that became the Incas probably arrived around 1200 CE. They were likely one of many small tribes. Nothing suggested their future dominance. Early Cusco was modest. Houses were simple stone structures with thatched roofs. Streets were narrow and irregular. There were no grand palaces or temples. The settlement clustered around a central plaza. A market operated on certain days. Life revolved around agricultural cycles. The first Inca rulers remained shadowy figures. Manco Capac may have been a real person, or he might represent multiple early leaders. The chronology is uncertain. Different sources provide conflicting dates. Some place him in the 12th century. Others suggest the 13th century. Sinchi Roca succeeded Manco Capac. His name means magnificent warrior. Yet stories suggest he was peaceful. He consolidated control over Cusco Valley. He established alliances with neighboring groups. He may have introduced the practice of skull deformation. Elite children had their heads bound to create elongated skulls. This marked their special status. Lyoke Yupanqui followed as third ruler. His reign was apparently unremarkable. Few stories survive about him. He may have extended Inca influence slightly. He possibly improved agricultural production. He maintained the kingdom without major conflicts. Sometimes stability is the greatest achievement. Manco Capac became the fourth Inca. Legends claim he was born after only 3 months gestation. He could walk and talk immediately. By 1 year old, he was adult-sized. These supernatural elements suggest later embellishment. He reportedly conquered several neighboring groups. The Inca domain began expanding beyond Cusco Valley. Capac Yupanqui ruled as fifth Inca. He continued gradual expansion. He may have been the first to venture beyond the immediate region. Some accounts credit him with reaching Lake Titicaca. This would have been symbolically important. It connected the Incas to their mythical origins. He also improved Cusco's infrastructure. Better roads linked surrounding communities. Inca Roca became the sixth ruler. He represented a dynastic change. Previous rulers belonged to Hurin Cusco, or Lower Cusco. Inca Roca established Hanan Cusco, or Upper Cusco. This division would persist throughout Inca history. It may reflect the incorporation of different ethnic groups, or it might represent ritual dualism. During Inca Roca's reign, the kingdom faced serious threats. The Chancas, a powerful confederation, pressed from the northwest. They controlled extensive territory. Their warriors were feared throughout the region. Conflict seemed inevitable. The Incas needed to strengthen their position. Yahuahuacac became the seventh Inca. His name means blood weeper. Legend says he cried blood as an infant. This was interpreted as a bad omen. His reign was troubled by internal conflicts. Various factions competed for influence. The Chanca threat continued growing. Some provinces rebelled against Inca authority. Viracocha Inca assumed power as eighth ruler. He shared the creator god's name. This might indicate special religious authority. Or perhaps he took the name later. His reign marked a turning point. The small kingdom would soon transform into an empire, but first it would face its greatest crisis. The early Incas developed crucial institutions during this period. The Elu kinship system organized society. These extended family groups shared common ancestors. They worked land collectively. They supported members during hardship. The Elu provided social security and identity. The Panaca system emerged among royalty. When an Inca ruler died, his descendants formed a Panaca. This royal corporation maintained his mummy. They preserved his palace and estates. They conducted ceremonies in his honor. Each ruler needed to acquire new wealth. This drove expansion and conquest. Religious practices crystallized during these early centuries. Inti, the sun god, became increasingly important. The Incas claimed direct descent from him. This solar connection justified their authority. Temples were built to honor Inti. Priests conducted daily ceremonies. Gold represented the sun's radiance. The Koya, or queen, gained significant authority. She was usually the Inca's sister. This preserved royal blood purity. She governed when the Inca was absent. She controlled extensive estates. She led important religious ceremonies. Her children were potential heirs. The Koya represented the moon in cosmic duality. Military organization evolved from militia to standing army. Early forces were seasonal warriors. Farmers fought between planting and harvest. Gradually, professional soldiers emerged. They trained constantly for war. They used standardized weapons. They followed established tactics. Military service brought social advancement. Administrative structures developed slowly. The decimal system organized populations. Groups of 10 families formed the basic unit. These were grouped into hundreds, then thousands. Officials supervised each level. This facilitated taxation and labor mobilization. The system would later enable rapid expansion. The quipu recording system was refined. These knotted cords stored numerical information. Different colors represented different categories. Knot types indicated specific numbers. Knot positions showed decimal places. Trained specialists called quipu mayoks maintained these records. They could track populations, tributes, and resources. Architecture grew more sophisticated. Early buildings used rough field stone. Gradually, shaped blocks became standard. Joints grew tighter and more precise. Trapezoidal doors and windows appeared. This distinctive shape resisted earthquakes. Buildings could sway without collapsing. The style would become iconic of Inca construction. Agricultural techniques improved continuously. Terracing expanded cultivatable land. Irrigation systems grew more complex. Crop rotation prevented soil exhaustion. Fertilizers increased yields. Guano from coastal islands enriched fields. Lamadung provided highland fertilizer. Storage facilities preserved surpluses. This agricultural foundation supported population growth. Trade networks expanded beyond local exchange. Luxury goods moved long distances. Spondylus shells came from Ecuador. Emeralds arrived from Colombia. Tropical feathers came from the Amazon. These prestige items marked elite status. They were used in religious ceremonies. They sealed political alliances. The Inca language, Quechua, spread gradually. It may not have been the original Inca tongue. Some scholars suggest they initially spoke Puquina, but Quechua became the administrative language. It facilitated communication across ethnic boundaries. Local languages persisted alongside it. Multilingualism was common among elites. Social stratification became more rigid. The Inca and his family stood at the apex. Noble orojones, big ears, or large ear ornaments. They filled administrative positions. Cuirassas governed local populations. They mediated between rulers and subjects. Commoners, called Hatun Runa, formed the majority. They farmed, built, and fought. Gender roles were complementary but distinct. Men worked fields and served in armies. Women maintained households and wove textiles. Both genders participated in communal labor. Women could own property. They could serve as priestesses. Some achieved significant political influence. The cosmic duality of male sun and female moon permeated society. By the early 15th century, the Incas controlled a modest domain. Their territory extended perhaps 40 miles from Cusco. They had survived 3 centuries through careful diplomacy. They balanced rival powers against each other. They absorbed useful techniques from neighbors. They developed distinctive institutions, but they remained one kingdom among many. Everything would change with the Chanca War. This conflict would transform the Incas from regional players to imperial conquerors. A new leader would emerge with revolutionary vision. The small kingdom would explode across the Andes. The age of empire was about to begin. The 9th ruler's ascension marked a critical moment. Viracocha Inca faced challenges unlike his predecessors. The kingdom teetered between survival and destruction. Enemy confederations pressed from multiple directions. Internal dissent weakened royal authority. The next decades would determine whether the Incas would vanish into historical obscurity or rise to unprecedented power. Viracocha Inca inherited a realm under pressure. The Chancas controlled territory northwest of Cusco. They had conquered numerous ethnic groups. Their confederation grew stronger each year. The Collas dominated the Lake Titicaca region. They controlled crucial trade routes. The Lupacas held the southern highlands. Each power exceeded Inca military strength. The new ruler pursued careful diplomacy. He arranged marriages with neighboring elites. His daughters wed foreign princes. allied princesses entered the Inca nobility, these bonds created mutual obligations. Former enemies became reluctant allies. The web of relationships grew increasingly complex. Viracocha also initiated construction projects. He built a palace at Caquia-Zaquixahuana. This site lay outside Cusco proper. Some interpreted this as abandoning the capital, others saw strategic positioning. The palace commanded important routes. It could serve as a fallback position if Cusco fell. Religious innovations marked Viracocha's reign. He claimed special connection to the creator deity. He promoted Viracocha worship alongside traditional gods. This may have been an attempt to unify diverse populations. A universal deity could transcend ethnic boundaries. Local gods remained but were subordinated to higher powers. The Inca military underwent significant reforms. Traditional seasonal levies proved insufficient. Semi-professional units were established. These warriors trained year-round. They developed specialized skills. Slingers practiced hitting targets at distance. Spearmen learned formation fighting. Club warriors mastered close combat. New weapons appeared in Inca arsenals. Bronze technology improved through captured smiths. Maces became heavier and more deadly. Arrow points grew sharper and more standardized. Cotton armor was reinforced with wooden slats. Shields were enlarged to protect against projectiles. Despite these improvements, the Chanca threat intensified. Their leader, Uscavilca, united disparate groups. He promised wealth from Cusco's conquest. Chanca armies swelled with ambitious warriors. They began systematic expansion toward Inca territory. Border skirmishes escalated into serious conflicts. Around 1438, the crisis reached its peak. A massive Chanca army marched on Cusco. Scouts reported numbers exceeding anything previously seen. The Confederation brought its full strength. They intended to end Inca independence permanently. Panic spread through the capital. Viracocha Inca made a controversial decision. He withdrew from Cusco with selected nobles. They retreated to his palace at Caquia-Zaquixahuana. He apparently believed resistance was futile. Better to preserve some authority than lose everything. This abandonment shocked many subjects. The Inca's designated heir, Inca Urcon, also fled. He took royal insignia with him. This included the mascapacha, the royal fringe. Without these symbols, no one could claim legitimate rule. The kingdom seemed leaderless. Many prepared to accept Chanca domination. However, another son refused to abandon Cusco. Prince Kusiyupanqui rallied the remaining defenders. He was not the designated heir, but he possessed remarkable charisma. He convinced warriors to stand and fight. He promised divine support for their cause. Legend claims supernatural assistance arrived. The very stones transformed into warriors. These Pururaka soldiers swelled the defending ranks. Modern historians suggest more mundane explanations. Perhaps nearby ethnic groups joined the defense. Maybe rural populations rallied to Cusco. Whatever the truth, Kusiyupanqui gathered sufficient forces. The battle for Cusco was fierce. Chanca warriors expected easy victory. They found determined resistance instead. Fighting raged through the streets. Neither side could claim clear advantage. Bodies accumulated in the plazas. Blood ran through irrigation channels. At the battle's climax, Kusiyupanqui performed an extraordinary feat. He personally killed Uscavilca in combat, or perhaps he captured the Chanca leader. Accounts vary on details. Regardless, Chanca morale collapsed. Their army retreated in disorder. Cusco was saved. Kusiyupanqui pursued the fleeing enemy. He wanted to prevent regrouping. Inca forces harried the Chancas for days. Many enemies were killed or captured. The Confederation dissolved into component parts. The Chanca threat was permanently eliminated. Victory brought political complications. Viracocha Inca still lived. Technically, he remained the legitimate ruler, but he had abandoned Cusco in its darkest hour. Kusiyupanqui had saved the kingdom. Popular opinion favored the victorious prince. A succession crisis seemed inevitable. Initially, Kusi Yupanqui showed formal respect. He presented victory trophies to his father, he credited success to divine favour, he acknowledged Viracocha's theoretical authority. But tensions simmered beneath ceremonial courtesy. The situation deteriorated when Viracocha insisted Inca Urcon remain heir. This was unacceptable to Cusco's defenders. They had risked everything while Urcon fled. They would not accept a coward as ruler. Support coalesced around Kusi Yupanqui. The exact sequence of subsequent events remains unclear. Inca Urcon may have been killed in battle, or perhaps he was assassinated. Some accounts say he drowned, others claim he fell from a cliff. Viracocha Inca either abdicated or was forcibly retired. By 1438, Kusi Yupanqui ruled unchallenged. The new ruler took the name Pachacuti. This means world transformer or earthquake. The name proved prophetic. He would indeed transform the Andean world. His reign marked the beginning of imperial expansion. The small kingdom would become a continental empire. Pachacuti immediately consolidated his authority. He rewarded supporters with lands and titles. He eliminated potential rivals through exile or execution. He reformed administrative structures. He standardized religious practices. Every aspect of society felt his influence. The victory over the Chanca provided momentum for expansion. Former Chanca subjects were incorporated into the Inca realm. Their warriors joined Inca armies. Their resources enriched Cusco. Each conquest facilitated the next. Success bred greater success. Pachacuti personally led campaigns in multiple directions. He conquered the Soras and Rucanas to the west. He subdued the Vilcas to the north. He dominated the Collas around Lake Titicaca. His armies seemed invincible. Enemy resistance crumbled rapidly. Military innovations contributed to these successes. Pachacuti organized the army into decimal units. 10 soldiers formed a squad under a Shunka Kamayuk. 10 squads created a company under a Pachaca Curaca. This continued up to divisions of 10,000. The system enabled precise command and control. Logistics received equal attention. Supply depots were established along march routes. These kolkas stored food, weapons, and equipment. Armies could campaign far from home. They didn't need to live off conquered lands. This reduced resistance from subject populations. Psychological warfare preceded physical combat. Inca envoys offered generous terms for peaceful submission. Local rulers could retain authority. Populations would be protected. Only tribute and loyalty were required. Many groups accepted these offers. Fighting was often unnecessary. When warfare proved necessary, Inca tactics were sophisticated. Feigned retreats lured enemies into ambushes. Night attacks disrupted enemy camps. Rivers were diverted to flood fortifications. Siege warfare starved defenders into submission. Each victory demonstrated Inca superiority. Pachacuti also excelled at post-conquest administration. Defeated enemies were not destroyed. Their skills were incorporated into the empire. Talented individuals received positions of authority. Local customs were respected when possible. Only practices conflicting with Inca rule were suppressed. The Mitama system relocated populations strategically. Loyal groups were settled in rebellious areas. Potential rebels were moved to secure regions. These population transfers prevented organized resistance. They also spread Inca culture throughout the empire. Quechua language expanded through these colonies. Pachacuti transformed Cusco into an imperial capital. The city was completely rebuilt. Streets were straightened and widened. Stone replaced adobe in important buildings. The Coricancha, or Golden Temple, was expanded. Its walls were covered with gold sheets. It became the empire's religious center. The Sacsayhuaman fortress protected Cusco. This massive complex crowned the hill above the city. Its walls used stones weighing over 100 tons. The joints fit so precisely that they needed no mortar. Multiple defensive lines protected the heights. The fortress could shelter the entire population during attacks. Urban planning reflected cosmic principles. Cusco was designed as a puma shape. Sacsayhuaman formed the head. The main plaza was the belly. Rivers channeled through stone conduits marked the tail. Radiating roads called Incas connected sacred sites. The city became a three-dimensional mandala. Pachacuti established the formal hierarchy of nobility. The Inca's sons by his principal wife, the Coya, were primary heirs. Sons by secondary wives formed the broader nobility. Each panasa maintained its founder's legacy. They competed for resources and influence. This competition drove continued expansion. Provincial administration was standardized. The empire was divided into 4 suyus or quarters. Chinchay Suyu extended north and west. Anti-Suyu covered the eastern forests. Kola Suyu included the southern highlands. Kunta Suyu comprised the southwestern coast. Each Suyu was subdivided into provinces. Caracas administered local populations. These indigenous leaders were incorporated into imperial hierarchy. They collected tribute for the Inca. They organized labor for public works. They maintained order in their territories. In exchange, they received privileges and protection. Their children were educated in Cusco. This ensured loyalty across generations. The Mita labor tax was systematized under Pachacuti. Every household owed labor service to the state. Men might serve in the army for several months. They could work on construction projects. They might transport goods across the empire. Women wove textiles for state warehouses. This labor built infrastructure and created wealth. Agricultural production increased dramatically. New terraces carved into mountainsides. Irrigation systems expanded into marginal lands. Crop varieties were selected for specific elevations. Storage facilities preserved massive surpluses. The empire could support larger populations. It could sustain armies during extended campaigns. Pachacuti promoted religious uniformity while allowing local variation. Inti worship became mandatory throughout the empire. Every major settlement built a sun temple, but local deities continued receiving veneration. They were simply incorporated into the broader pantheon. The Incas claimed these gods were Inti's children or servants. The Capacocha ceremony reinforced imperial unity. During important events, children were selected from provinces. These perfect specimens were brought to Cusco. They participated in elaborate ceremonies. Then they returned home to be sacrificed. This distributed sacred power throughout the empire. It connected peripheries to the center. Pachacuti established the Aklawasi institution. These houses of chosen women trained selected girls. They learned weaving, cooking, and religious duties. Some became priestesses in temples. Others married nobles or allies. The most beautiful might become secondary wives of the Inca. This system created empire-wide networks of relationships. Education was formalized for noble youth. The Yachaiwasi, or House of Learning, taught administrative skills. Students learned quipu accounting. They studied history and religion. They practiced military tactics. They mastered multiple languages. Graduation involved rigorous physical and mental tests. The road system expanded rapidly under Pachacuti. 2 main highways ran north-south through the empire. The coastal road traversed desert plains. The highland road followed mountain ridges. Lateral roads connected these arteries. Bridges spanned rivers and chasms. The network eventually exceeded 25,000 miles. Chasqui runners carried messages along these roads. Relay stations stood every few miles. Fresh runners waited at each post. Messages could travel 150 miles per day. The Inca in Cusco could receive coastal fish still fresh. Information moved faster than armies. This communication network enabled centralized control. Pachacuti lived into his 70s, remarkable for that era. He ruled for over 30 years. During this time, he transformed a small kingdom into a major power, but expansion had only begun. His son would extend conquests even further. Tupac Inca Yupanqui was groomed for succession. He accompanied his father on campaigns. He learned strategy through observation. He commanded armies independently. He proved himself capable of leadership. When Pachacuti grew old, Tupac assumed military command. The transition of power occurred smoothly around 1471. Pachacuti may have formally abdicated, or perhaps he retained ceremonial authority while Tupac exercised real power. The exact arrangement remains unclear. What matters is that succession avoided civil war. Tupac Inca Yupanqui inherited an empire primed for expansion. His father had created the administrative machinery. The army was experienced and confident. Resources flowed from conquered provinces. The young ruler possessed ambition matching his opportunities. Under his leadership, the empire would reach its greatest extent. Tupac's first major campaign targeted the northern highlands. The kingdoms beyond Cajamarca had maintained independence. They controlled rich valleys and important trade routes. Their conquest would secure the empire's northern frontier. Tupac assembled a massive army for this campaign. The march north demonstrated Inca organizational capacity. Tens of thousands of warriors moved in coordinated columns. Supply trains followed with food and equipment. Engineers preceded the army, improving roads. The movement resembled a migration more than a military campaign. Resistance varied among northern peoples. Some submitted after token resistance. They recognized the futility of opposition. Others fought desperately for independence. The Cañari people proved particularly stubborn. Their homeland centered around modern Cuenca in Ecuador. They possessed strong fortifications and determined warriors. The siege of Cañari strongholds lasted months. Inca forces systematically reduced defensive positions. They diverted water sources from fortresses. They built ramps to assault walls. They used psychological tactics to weaken morale. Eventually, Cañari resistance collapsed. Tupac showed wisdom in victory. Rather than destroying the Cañari, he incorporated them. Their warriors became elite units in his army. Their craftsmen were valued for their skills. Their leaders retained local authority. This magnanimity encouraged other groups to submit peacefully. The conquest continued into modern Ecuador. The kingdoms of Quito offered fierce resistance. These northern peoples had never been conquered. They fought with desperate courage. Battles raged across mountain valleys. Neither side could claim easy victory. Inca technology gradually prevailed. Bronze weapons proved superior to stone. Organized formations defeated individual valor. Logistics sustained campaigns far from home. One by one, northern fortresses fell. The kingdom of Quito was incorporated into the empire. Tupac pushed beyond previous boundaries. His armies reached modern Colombia. They encountered new challenges in tropical lowlands. Disease weakened highland warriors. The jungle environment favored defenders. Supply lines stretched dangerously thin. The Inca advance finally halted at the Uncasmayo River. While northern campaigns progressed, other armies moved east. The Antisuyu Quarter bordered the Amazon rainforest. This green wall had always limited Inca expansion. The jungle was alien to highland peoples, but Tupac attempted what predecessors avoided. Eastern expeditions met mixed success. Some valleys were conquered and fortified. Coca plantations were established for leaf production. Trading posts facilitated exchange with forest peoples. But permanent control proved impossible. The jungle remained unconquered. Disease and hostile tribes forced periodic retreats. Tupac's greatest achievements came through southern expansion. The Inca Empire pushed into modern Bolivia and Chile. These campaigns covered vast distances. Armies marched through some of Earth's driest deserts. They crossed mountain passes at extreme altitudes. The logistical challenges were staggering. The collar kingdoms around Lake Titicaca were fully absorbed. Previous Incas had claimed nominal control. Tupac established direct administration. He built new administrative centers. He stationed permanent garrisons. He imposed Inca law and religion. The sacred lake became integral to the empire. Further south lay the Lupaca kingdom. These people controlled extensive llama herds. Their wealth derived from caravan trade. They had traditionally balanced between competing powers. Tupac ended their independence through combined diplomacy and force. The southern coastal desert presented unique challenges. The Atacama is one of Earth's driest places. Some areas receive no measurable rainfall. Water exists only in rare oasis valleys. Yet people survived in this harsh landscape. They had adapted over millennia. Tupac conquered these desert peoples systematically. Each oasis was isolated and surrounded. Surrender was the only option. The empire gained access to coastal resources. Guano deposits provided agricultural fertilizer. Coastal fisheries supplied protein. Maritime trade expanded imperial wealth. The Chile expansion reached the Maule River. Here, Inca forces encountered the Mapuche people. These warriors proved formidable opponents. They used different tactics than highland peoples. They conducted guerrilla warfare from forests. They refused pitched battles against superior numbers. The Battle of the Maule marked the empire's limit. Inca and Mapuche forces fought for 3 days. Neither could claim decisive victory. Thousands died on both sides. Tupac decided against further expansion. The Maule River became the southern frontier. Naval expeditions possibly extended Inca influence offshore. Stories tell of Tupac's voyage into the Pacific. He allegedly discovered islands with black-skinned people. These might have been the Galapagos Islands, or perhaps Easter Island. Some scholars dismiss these accounts as legends. Others find them plausible given Inca capabilities. The empire now stretched 2,500 miles, from southern Colombia to central Chile, from the Pacific Ocean to Amazon rainforest. It encompassed every possible environment: tropical jungles, coastal deserts, high mountains and fertile valleys. No other pre-Columbian state matched its extent. Governing this vast territory required administrative innovation. Tupac refined his father's systems. The decimal organization was strictly enforced. Every person was counted and categorized. Labor obligations were precisely calculated. Resource flows were carefully monitored. New provincial capitals were established. These administrative centers replicated Cusco's layout. They contained sun temples and public plazas. Government buildings housed officials and records. Storage facilities held regional tribute. Military garrisons ensured security. The Yanacona class expanded under Tupac. These were people removed from traditional communities. They served the Inca directly. They might be craftsmen, servants, or administrators. They owed no mitter labor tax. Their loyalty was to the emperor personally. This created a power base independent of traditional nobility. Religious integration intensified during Tupac's reign. Major provincial deities were brought to Cusco. They were housed in the Coricancha temple. This concentrated sacred power in the capital. Local populations maintained spiritual connections to Cusco. Pilgrimages reinforced imperial unity. The Capacocha ritual reached its greatest elaboration. Children were selected from every province. They traveled to Cusco for special ceremonies. The Inca blessed them personally. They returned home as sacred beings. Their sacrifice connected localities to imperial power. Frozen mummies discovered on mountain peaks testify to this practice. Economic integration accelerated under Tupac. Specialized production zones were established. The coast produced cotton and seafood. Highlands supplied potatoes and llama wool. Eastern slopes grew coca and tropical fruits. Goods moved along the road network. State warehouses facilitated distribution. The quipu system grew more sophisticated. These knotted cords now recorded complex information. Not just numbers, but possibly narratives. Different colors indicated different categories. Knot types conveyed specific meanings. Master accountants could read entire histories. This system enabled administration without writing. Tupac promoted architectural standardization. Inca construction techniques spread throughout the empire. Trapezoidal doors and windows appeared everywhere. Precise stone fitting became the norm. Local materials were used, but imperial style dominated. Architecture proclaimed Inca presence. Military organization reached peak efficiency. The imperial army may have numbered 200,000. Professional officers commanded regional forces. Specialized units developed unique capabilities. Engineers built roads and bridges. Slingers provided missile support. Shock troops led assaults. Weapons production was centralized. State workshops produced standardized equipment. Bronze weapons were distributed to elite units. Common soldiers received wooden clubs and slings. Cotton armor was mass-produced. This standardization simplified logistics and training. Intelligence networks monitored potential threats. Spies operated in unconquered territories. They reported on military preparations. They identified political divisions. They spread propaganda about Inca power. Information warfare preceded physical conquest. Tupac ruled for approximately 25 years. He died around 1493, probably in his 60s. His death was carefully managed. The body was mummified with great ceremony. The Paneka of Tupac Yupanqui was established. They would maintain his mummy and estates forever. His designated heir was Huayna Capac. The succession appeared smooth initially. The new ruler was young but capable. He had been carefully educated. He understood imperial administration. He commanded respect from the nobility. The empire seemed poised for continued glory. Life in the Inca Empire followed rhythms established over millennia. The sun rose over mountain peaks. Farmers walked to their fields. Women prepared morning meals. Children helped with simple tasks. These patterns repeated across the empire, from coastal fishing villages to highland potato farms. Daily existence blended continuity with imperial innovation. The Aelu remained society's foundation. These kinship groups traced descent from common ancestors. Real or mythical founders united members. An Aelu might include dozens of families, or it could encompass thousands of people. Size depended on history and geography. Each Aelu controlled specific territory. Members worked land collectively. Within the Aelu, reciprocity governed relationships. The principle of Aini meant mutual assistance. Families helped each other plant and harvest. They shared labor for house construction. They supported members during illness or hardship. This reciprocity created social insurance. No one faced challenges alone. Marriage customs varied but followed patterns. Young people often chose their own partners, but families needed to approve matches. Marriage within the Aelu was common. This kept land rights consolidated. Ceremonies varied by region. Some involved ritual kidnapping. Others featured elaborate gift exchanges. Most marriages were monogamous for commoners. Men could take additional wives if they could support them. This was rare among farmers. Elite men often had multiple wives. The Inca himself might have hundreds. Secondary wives came from allied noble families. These marriages created political alliances. Pregnancy and childbirth involved numerous rituals. Pregnant women avoided certain foods. They couldn't look at deformed animals. This might affect the baby. They performed ceremonies for easy delivery. Midwives assisted with birth. They knew herbs to ease pain. They could turn breech babies. Newborns were not immediately named. They received temporary names like boy or girl. The Rutu Chico ceremony occurred around age 2. The child's hair was cut for the first time. Relatives gave gifts and blessings. The child received their permanent name. This marked full acceptance into the community. Children learned through observation and practice. Boys followed fathers to fields. They learned to plant and harvest. They practiced using tools. Girls stayed with mothers. They learned cooking and weaving. They cared for younger siblings. Formal education existed only for nobility. Coming-of-age ceremonies marked adulthood. The Huarachico ritual initiated noble boys. They underwent physical challenges. They fasted and kept vigil. They received adult names and weapons. Common boys had simpler ceremonies. Girls underwent the quipu chico at first menstruation. They fasted for 3 days. They received new clothes and adult names. Daily meals were simple but nutritious. Breakfast might be toasted corn or quinoa porridge. Lunch was the main meal. Stews combined potatoes with vegetables. Meat appeared occasionally. Guinea pigs provided protein. Llama meat was reserved for special occasions. Dinner was usually leftovers. Food preparation required significant labor. Corn was ground on stone metates. This took hours of hard work. Potatoes were boiled or roasted. Freeze-drying created chuño for storage. Fermentation produced chicha beer. This mild alcoholic beverage accompanied most meals. Cooking happened in clay pots over open fires. Most homes had outdoor kitchens. Smoke from indoor cooking blackened walls. Fuel varied by region. Coastal people burned driftwood. Highlanders used llama dung. It burned hot and steady. Housing reflected local materials and climate. Coastal peoples built with adobe bricks. These mud structures stayed cool. Highland homes used stone walls. Thick walls retained heat. Roofs were thatched with grass. Floors were packed earth. Most homes were single rooms. The family slept together on reed mats. Possessions were minimal. Clay pots for cooking and storage. Stone tools for farming. Textiles for clothing and blankets. Perhaps some religious objects. Furniture was almost unknown. People sat on the ground. They ate from pottery bowls. Possessions hung from wall pegs. Everything had practical purpose. Decoration was minimal except for textiles. Clothing marked social status and ethnicity. Each region had distinctive styles. Headbands, hats, and hairstyles identified origins. The state mandated these differences. People couldn't adopt foreign styles. This enabled easy identification. Common men wore simple tunics. These unku reached the knees. A cloak provided warmth. Sandals protected feet. Materials were usually undyed wool. Brown and grey dominated. Decoration was minimal. Women wore wrapped dresses called anaku. These were held with pins called tupu. A shawl covered the shoulders. Sandals were similar to men's. Women's clothing had more colour. Natural dyes created patterns. Elite clothing displayed wealth and power. Fine kumbi cloth was incredibly soft. Vicuña wool was reserved for nobility. Bright colours came from rare dyes. Geometric patterns encoded information. Clothing communicated without words. Textile production occupied much female time. Every woman spun thread constantly. They spun while walking. They spun during conversations. The spindle never stopped moving. Thread accumulated slowly. Weaving required dedicated time. Simple cloth was made on backstrap looms. Women leaned back to create tension. They passed weft threads through warp. Patterns emerged row by row. Complex designs took months to complete. Personal hygiene was important. People bathed in rivers when possible. They used soapy plants for cleaning. Hair was kept neat and styled. Men plucked facial hair. Cleanliness indicated good character. Medicine combined practical and spiritual approaches. Healers knew medicinal plants. Willow bark reduced fever. Coca leaves numbed pain. But illness had spiritual causes. Bad behavior angered gods. Sorcery caused mysterious ailments. Skull surgery was remarkably advanced. Trepanation removed bone sections. This relieved pressure from head injuries. Many patients survived the procedure. Skulls show healing around holes. Inca surgeons had significant skill. Work dominated most people's lives. Agricultural tasks followed seasonal cycles. Planting required community effort. Everyone worked together. Weeding was continuous through growing season. Harvest brought another communal push. The agricultural calendar was precisely calculated. Astronomers tracked celestial movements. They determined optimal planting times. Different crops had different schedules. Potatoes were planted in August. Corn followed in September. Irrigation required constant maintenance. Channels needed regular cleaning. Silt accumulated and blocked flow. Communities organized work parties. Everyone contributed labor. Water was too precious to waste. Herding occupied highland populations. Llamas and alpacas provided wool and meat. They also transported goods. Children often tended flocks. They protected animals from predators. They knew each animal individually. Craft production supplemented agriculture. Potters made vessels for daily use. They also created ceremonial pieces. Metal workers produced tools and ornaments. Weavers created textiles for trade. These specialists exchanged products for food. Markets operated on scheduled days. People brought surplus products. Barter was the standard exchange. Corn might trade for potatoes, textiles exchanged for pottery. No currency existed. Value was negotiated individually. The middle labour tax affected everyone. Adult men owed several months annually. They might join military campaigns. They could work construction projects. They might transport goods. The state provided food during service. Women's mitre usually involved textiles. They wove cloth for state warehouses. This equipped armies and administrators. Fine textiles served as diplomatic gifts. Women worked at home usually. Sometimes they gathered in workshops. Entertainment punctuated work routines. Music accompanied many activities. Drums and flutes were common. Songs preserved historical memories. Dancing marked special occasions. Stories were told around evening fires. Games provided recreation. Dice games used marked beans. Board games involved moving pieces. Children played with tops and balls. Adults gambled on various outcomes. These activities built social bonds. Festivals broke normal routines. Each month had specific celebrations. These honoured different deities. Entire communities participated. Work stopped for major festivals. People dressed in finest clothes. Special foods were prepared. Alcohol consumption was regulated. Chicha beer was common, but drunkenness outside festivals was punished. The state controlled coca use. Only certain people could chew leaves. These restrictions maintained social order. Death brought elaborate rituals. Bodies were carefully prepared. They were placed in fetal position. This prepared for rebirth. Possessions accompanied the deceased. Food and drink were provided. The dead needed sustenance. Mummification preserved important individuals. Bodies were dried in cold, dry air. Internal organs were sometimes removed. The process took months. Mummies remained part of society. They owned property and received offerings. Ancestor veneration connected past and present. Mummies participated in festivals. They were consulted on important decisions. They witnessed marriages and births. Death was transformation, not ending. The deceased remained community members. Social mobility was limited but possible. Military service offered advancement. Exceptional craftsmen gained recognition. Beautiful women might marry upward. Loyal service brought rewards, but most people remained in birth status. Justice was swift and harsh. Theft was severely punished. First offence brought beating. Second offence meant death. Murder was always capital. Adultery could bring execution. Lying to officials brought torture. Community responsibility was emphasized. If someone committed crimes, their alius suffered. This encouraged mutual surveillance. People monitored neighbors' behavior. Social pressure maintained conformity. Individual freedom was sacrificed for collective harmony. The elderly received respect and support. They couldn't perform hard labor, but they contributed knowledge. They taught children traditions. They performed light tasks. The Ailu ensured their welfare. This was daily life for most imperial subjects. It was hard, but not hopeless. Community support provided security. Imperial peace reduced warfare. State granaries prevented famine. Most people lived better than their ancestors. The empire provided stability, if not freedom. The Inca universe pulsed with sacred power. Every mountain peak housed a deity. Every spring possessed spirit. Rocks could transform into warriors. The dead walked among the living. This animate cosmos required constant attention. Proper ceremonies maintained cosmic balance. Neglect invited catastrophe. Viracocha stood as supreme creator. He emerged from Lake Titicaca's waters. He shaped humans from clay. He set celestial bodies in motion. He established natural laws. Then he walked away across the Pacific. He promised to return someday. This distant deity received respect but little daily worship. Inti dominated religious practice. The sun god was the Inca's divine ancestor. He provided light and warmth. He made crops grow. He enabled life itself. Every morning priests greeted his arrival. Every evening they bid him farewell. Gold represented his divine radiance. Mamaquilla governed the night. The moon goddess was Inti's wife and sister. She regulated time's passage. Women especially honoured her. She controlled fertility and childbirth. Silver reflected her pale light. Her phases determined ceremonial calendars. Illapa commanded storms and rain. This thunder god wielded a sling. His stones created lightning. The crack was his sling sound. He drew water from the celestial river. The Milky Way was his water source. Farmers prayed for his blessing. Pachamama nurtured all life. The Earth Mother provided sustenance. Farmers made offerings before planting. They poured chicha on the ground. They burned coca leaves. They thanked her for harvests. She required constant appreciation. Mountains possessed individual spirits. These Apu watched over communities. The highest peaks were most powerful. Azangate protected Cusco. Illimani guarded the Altiplano. Each settlement had its guardian mountain. People made pilgrimages to summit shrines. Huacas marked sacred locations. These could be unusual rocks. They might be springs or caves. Battlefields became huacas. Places where lightning struck were sacred. The empire contained thousands of huacas. Each required appropriate offerings. The Coricancha centered religious architecture. This golden enclosure contained multiple temples. The Sun Temple's walls were covered with gold. The Moon Temple was plated with silver. Other buildings honored stars and weather. Gardens contained golden plants and animals. Within the Coricancha stood remarkable representations. Life-sized golden llamas grazed in courtyards. Golden corn grew in sacred gardens. These weren't mere decorations. They were offerings to deities. They demonstrated the empire's wealth and devotion. Provincial temples replicated Cusco's model. Every major city had sun temples. Priests conducted daily rituals. Sacred fires burned continuously. Chosen women maintained the temples. They wove textiles for ceremonies. They prepared food for offerings. The priestly hierarchy paralleled political structure. The Willakumu served as high priest. He was usually the Inca's brother or uncle. He controlled religious appointments. He interpreted divine will. He conducted major ceremonies. His authority nearly equaled the Incas. Below him, specialized priests served different deities. Sun priests were most prestigious. They came from noble families. Moon priestesses were usually noble women. Local Huaca priests might be commoners. Each had specific responsibilities. Divination guided important decisions. Priests examined llama lungs. They watched spider movements. They interpreted coca leaf patterns. They observed bird flights. These signs revealed divine will. No major undertaking proceeded without consultation. Sacrifice maintained cosmic reciprocity. The gods provided sustenance and protection. Humans owed appropriate payment. This usually involved valuable objects. Fine textiles were burned. Chicha was poured out. Coca leaves were offered. Animal sacrifice occurred regularly. Guinea pigs were common offerings. Llamas were sacrificed for important events. Their blood was sprinkled on sacred objects. The meat was consumed in communal feasts. Every part had ceremonial purpose. Human sacrifice happened rarely but significantly. The Capacocha ceremony was most elaborate. Children were selected for perfection. They had no blemishes or birthmarks. They came from noble families. They were honored, not victimized. These children traveled to Cusco. They participated in major ceremonies. The Inca blessed them personally. They married in symbolic ceremonies. Then they returned to their provinces. They climbed sacred mountains. They were given chicha and coca. They fell asleep and froze. They became intermediaries between worlds. The religious calendar structured time. Each month had specific celebrations. These honored different aspects of divinity. Agricultural cycles intertwined with ceremonies. Planting and harvest had religious significance. Inti Raymi celebrated the winter solstice. This was the sun's rebirth. The festival lasted 9 days. Nobles from across the empire attended. Hundreds of llamas were sacrificed. The Inca renewed his divine mandate. Capac Raymi initiated noble youth. Boys underwent physical trials. They fasted and kept vigil. They received adult weapons. They pierced their ears for ornaments. They became full nobles. This ceremony reinforced hierarchy. The Situa ceremony cleansed evil. This happened during September rains. Disease was ritually expelled. Warriors ran through streets with torches. They drove out malevolent spirits. Rivers carried away impurity. Aimre celebrated the harvest. Communities gave thanks for abundance. The first fruits were offered. Mummies joined the festivities. Past and present merged. Continuity was affirmed. Each ceremony required specific preparations. Participants fasted beforehand. They abstained from sex. They avoided certain foods. They confessed wrongdoings. Purification was essential. Confession played an important role. Priests heard admissions of sin. They prescribed penances. They performed cleansing rituals. Sins could cause illness. They might bring natural disasters. Confession protected communities. Music accompanied all ceremonies. Drums provided rhythm. Flutes created melodies. Conch shells announced events. Songs preserved religious knowledge. Each deity had specific hymns. Dance expressed religious devotion. Movements had symbolic meaning. Costumes represented different forces. Masked dancers became deities. The boundary between human and divine dissolved. Processions demonstrated imperial power. Mummies of past Incas participated. They sat on golden litters. Attendants carried them through streets. Each panaka displayed its founder. History became visible. The sect system organized sacred space. Imaginary lines radiated from Coricancha. These connected huacas in sequence. Specific groups maintained each line. They performed rituals in order. The landscape became a ritual calendar. Astronomy informed religious practice. Priests tracked celestial movements. They predicted eclipses. They determined planting times. They identified auspicious dates. The heavens revealed divine intentions. The Milky Way held special significance. This celestial river connected worlds. Dark clouds within it formed constellations. These represented animals. The Llama constellation indicated breeding season. The fox warned of thieves. Solstices and equinoxes were carefully observed. Pillars marked sunset positions. Shadows indicated seasonal changes. These observations ensured agricultural success. They also confirmed cosmic order. Creation myths explained existence. Multiple versions existed simultaneously. Each served different purposes. Some justified political authority. Others explained natural phenomena. Together they formed complex cosmology. One myth described 3 attempts at creation. Viracocha first made giants from stone, but they were too large. He destroyed them with floods. Evidence remained in massive ruins. The second attempt created humans from clay, but they lacked intelligence. They lived in darkness. The third attempt succeeded. Viracocha gave humans souls. He taught them civilization. The underworld, Ukupacha, lay beneath the earth. The dead travelled there. It wasn't punishment, but continuation. Life persisted in different form. The deceased needed food and possessions. They maintained social relationships. Pacha was the visible world. Humans, animals, and plants lived here. But spiritual forces permeated everything. The sacred and mundane intermingled. Proper behavior maintained balance. Misconduct disrupted harmony. Pacha existed above. Gods resided in this upper realm. Condors flew between worlds. Mountains connected earth and sky. Humans could communicate upward through ceremonies. These 3 worlds were interconnected. Serpents represented the underworld. Pumas symbolized this world. Condors indicated the celestial realm. Together they formed unity. This trilogy appeared throughout Inca art. Ancestor veneration bridged life and death. Mummies weren't mere bodies. They retained personality and power. They owned property. They had servants. They participated in decisions. Death transformed but didn't end existence. Each panaka maintained its founder's mummy. They preserved his palace. They conducted ceremonies in his name. They competed for resources and influence. The dead shaped politics. Common people also venerated ancestors. Family mummies were kept in caves. They were brought out for festivals. They received food and drink. They were consulted on problems. They provided guidance and protection. This religious system justified imperial rule. The Inca was divine. His authority came from the sun. Resistance meant opposing gods. Conquest spread divine order. The empire was sacred mandate. Local religions were incorporated, not eliminated. Provincial deities joined the imperial pantheon. They became Inti's children or servants. Their priests served under Inca supervision. Their ceremonies continued with modifications. This flexibility reduced resistance. Some practices were forbidden. Human sacrifice outside state control was banned. Certain forms of witchcraft were punished. Religious authority was centralized. But diversity persisted within limits. The religious system provided meaning and structure. It explained natural phenomena. It justified social hierarchy. It connected communities. It linked past and present. It promised continuity. In an uncertain world, it offered certainty. The Incas built impossibilities. They moved mountains stone by stone. They suspended bridges across bottomless chasms. They carved cities from living rock. They channeled water through deserts. Without wheels, without iron, without written plans, they created monuments that endure 5 centuries later. Stone was their primary medium. The Andes provided infinite varieties: granite for strength, limestone for carving, andesite for precision work. Each stone had specific properties. Master builders understood these intimately. Quarrying required sophisticated techniques. Wooden wedges were driven into cracks. Water swelled the wood. The expansion split stone along natural lines. Fire heating and water cooling created fractures. Bronze chisels refined shapes. Moving massive stones challenged ingenuity. The largest weighed over 300 tons. No wheels existed in the Americas. Stones were dragged on wooden sledges. Hundreds of workers pulled ropes. Log rollers reduced friction. Ramps provided mechanical advantage. The mystery of fitting remains astounding. Stones were shaped to interlock perfectly. Each joint was unique. No mortar was needed. Papers cannot slip between stones. This precision required extraordinary skill. One theory suggests constant refinement. Stones were repeatedly lifted and lowered. High points were marked with chalk. These were ground away. The process continued until perfect fit was achieved. This required enormous patience. Another technique involved templates. A straight edge identified gaps. These were filled with clay. The clay shape indicated required adjustments. Grinding continued until gaps disappeared. Each stone might require weeks of work. Polygonal masonry characterized imperial architecture. Stones had multiple angles. Each face contacted several neighbors. This created incredible stability. Earthquakes couldn't dislodge interlocked blocks. Buildings swayed but didn't collapse. Trapezoidal openings became signatures. Doors and windows narrowed toward the top. This shape distributed weight effectively. It also resisted seismic forces. The style appeared throughout the empire. Cusco showcased architectural mastery. The city was completely rebuilt under Pachacuti. Streets were straightened and paved. Channels carried water and waste. Buildings followed standardized plans. The Coricancha demonstrated religious architecture. Its walls used perfectly fitted stones. No gaps existed between blocks. The walls leaned slightly inward. This increased stability. Gold plates once covered everything. Sacsayhuaman Fortress protected Cusco. 3 zigzag walls defended the approach. Each was higher than the last. The largest stones formed the lowest level. Some individual blocks weighed 300 tons. The fortress could shelter Cusco's entire population. Storage rooms held supplies. Cisterns provided water. Towers gave commanding views. Underground passages enabled secret movement. It was virtually impregnable. Ollantaytambo displayed urban planning. This royal estate controlled a strategic valley. Terraces climbed steep mountainsides. A temple complex crowned the summit. Massive stones formed ceremonial platforms. The stones came from quarries across the valley. They crossed the Urubamba River. They ascended 500 feet. How this was accomplished remains debated. Ramps, levers, and human determination somehow succeeded. Pisac combined multiple functions. Agricultural terraces fed populations. Military fortifications controlled access. Religious temples honored deities. Royal residences housed nobility. Cemeteries preserved the dead. Everything integrated harmoniously. The terraces themselves were engineering marvels. Retaining walls prevented erosion. Gravel layers provided drainage. Topsoil was carried from valleys. Microclimates were created artificially. Each terrace level had different conditions. Machu Picchu epitomized Inca achievement. This estate perched on a mountain ridge. Vertical cliffs dropped on 3 sides. Only one narrow approach existed. The location was virtually invisible from below. The site's construction required incredible planning. Every stone was carried up the mountain. Water was channeled from distant springs. Terraces were carved from bedrock. Buildings were integrated with natural features. The Intihuatana stone marked astronomical events. This carved rock aligned with celestial movements. Shadows indicated solstices and equinoxes. It served as a precise calendar. Similar stones existed at other sites. Water management showcased hydraulic engineering. Fountains provided fresh water. Channels directed rainfall. Drainage prevented flooding. The system still functions today. Modern engineers marvel at its sophistication. Road construction unified the empire. 2 main highways ran north-south. The coastal road crossed deserts. The highland road followed mountain ridges. Secondary roads connected these arteries. The network totaled 25,000 miles. Highland roads were engineering challenges. They climbed steep slopes through switchbacks. They crossed marshes on raised causeways. They tunneled through solid rock. They maintained surprisingly gentle gradients. Coastal roads faced different problems. Shifting sand dunes required constant maintenance. Flash floods destroyed sections. Yet the roads persisted. Walls protected against sand. Drainage channels handled water. Bridges spanned impossible gaps. The Apurimac suspension bridge stretched 150 feet. Cables were woven from grass. They were thick as human torsos. They supported enormous loads. They lasted only 2 years. Bridge construction was communal obligation. Local communities provided materials and labor. Specialized builders supervised construction. The process took weeks. Ceremonies marked completion. Then maintenance began immediately. Stairways conquered vertical obstacles. Steps were carved into cliff faces. Some climbed thousands of feet. Each step was precisely measured. They were wide enough for llama caravans. They included resting platforms. Drainage channels prevented water damage. Tunnels shortened distances through mountains. Workers chipped through solid rock. They followed natural fissures when possible. Some tunnels extended hundreds of feet. Ventilation shafts provided air. The work took years to complete. Storage facilities preserved imperial wealth. Kolkas were circular or rectangular storehouses. They were built on hillsides for drainage. Cool air preserved contents. Ventilation prevented spoilage. Thousands dotted the landscape. These warehouses held everything necessary. Food for armies and workers, weapons and military equipment, textiles for distribution, tools for construction projects, seeds for planting. The empire's wealth was visible. Construction techniques varied by region. Coastal builders used adobe bricks. These were made from mud and straw. They were dried in the sun. Walls were plastered smooth. Paint added decoration. Highland construction favored stone. Local materials determined style. Fieldstone created rustic walls. Cut stone indicated importance. The finest work appeared in religious buildings. Each technique had appropriate uses. Thatched roofs were standard. Ichu grass grew at high altitudes. It was bundled tightly. Layers were overlapped like shingles. These roofs lasted decades. They insulated against cold. They shed rain effectively. Urban planning followed cosmic principles. Cities were oriented to cardinal directions. Main plazas marked centers. Important buildings faced east. Streets radiated outward. The layout reflected heavenly order. Drainage systems prevented flooding. Channels ran beneath streets. They carried waste away. They were lined with stone. They had regular cleaning access. Cities remained remarkably clean. Aqueducts brought water from distant sources. Channels followed gentle gradients. They crossed valleys on raised bridges. They tunneled through hills. They delivered constant flow. Some still function today. The Nazca inherited ancient techniques. Underground aqueducts accessed water tables. Spiral wells provided maintenance access. Stone covers prevented evaporation. This system irrigated desert valleys. It represented accumulated knowledge. Fountain design combined function and beauty. Water emerged from carved spouts. It filled sequential basins. Each level had specific purposes: drinking, washing, and ritual uses. The sound created peaceful ambience. Agricultural infrastructure supported millions. Terraces covered entire mountainsides. They created millions of acres. Each terrace was perfectly level. They were connected by stairs. They transformed vertical land into horizontal fields. Irrigation systems distributed water precisely. Main channels fed secondary branches. These supplied individual terraces. Gates controlled flow. Distribution followed strict schedules. Every field received appropriate water. Raised fields managed wetlands. Waru created planting mounds. Channels between them controlled water. This prevented frost damage. It also provided fish habitat. The system was incredibly productive. Ceremonial architecture inspired awe. Ushnus were pyramid platforms. They elevated rulers above crowds. They served as astronomical observatories. They marked sacred spaces. They demonstrated imperial power. Kalankas were great halls. These rectangular buildings hosted gatherings. They could hold hundreds of people. They had multiple doorways. They faced main plazas. They were sites of feasting and ceremony. Kanchas organized residential space. These were rectangular compounds. Rooms surrounded central courtyards. They housed related families. They provided security and privacy. They were replicated throughout the empire. The Mita labor system enabled construction. Communities provided workers' rotation. The state fed and housed them. They worked for specified periods. Then they returned home. This mobilized enormous workforces. Specialized workers had specific skills. Master architects designed projects. Stonemasons shaped blocks. Engineers calculated angles. Artists added decorative elements. Each contributed expertise. Tools were simple but effective. Bronze chisels cut stone. Wooden levers moved blocks. Plumb bobs ensured vertical walls. Cords measured distances. Water levels checked horizontal surfaces. Planning involved models and drawings. Clay maquettes showed designs. Strings marked building locations. Stakes outlined foundations. The vision preceded construction. Nothing was left to chance. Quality control was rigorous. Master builders inspected work. Substandard construction was rebuilt. Workers took pride in craftsmanship. Their work would last forever. Reputation mattered immensely. Maintenance continued perpetually. Roads required constant repair. Bridges needed replacement. Buildings were regularly renovated. The infrastructure demanded attention. Communities understood this responsibility. Earthquake resistance was paramount. The Andes are seismically active. Buildings must survive shaking. Inca architecture proved remarkably resilient. Trapezoidal shapes dissipated energy. Interlocking stones prevented collapse. Different building categories served various purposes. Administrative centers governed provinces. Military fortresses controlled territory. Religious sites honored deities. Agricultural facilities stored produce. Each had distinctive features. Provincial architecture displayed local variation. Imperial style was adapted to local materials. Regional traditions persisted. But Inca elements were always present. This created unity within diversity. The architecture communicated messages. Size indicated importance. Quality showed imperial favor. Style proclaimed Inca presence. Buildings were political statements. They made power visible. Sacred geometry influenced design. Proportions followed mathematical relationships. Alignments marked celestial events. Numbers had symbolic meaning. Architecture encoded cosmology. Buildings were three-dimensional prayers. The legacy endures today. Inca walls support colonial buildings. Inca roads are still traveled. Inca terraces still produce crops. Inca channels still carry water. The engineering was built for eternity. Modern engineers study Inca techniques. They marvel at precision without machinery. They admire solutions to complex problems. They recognize sustainable practices. They learn from ancient wisdom. Tourism showcases these achievements. Millions visit Machu Picchu annually. They walk Inca trails. They photograph perfect stonework. They wonder at the accomplishment. The architecture continues inspiring awe. The Inca Empire functioned like a vast machine. Every person was a component. Every resource was allocated. Every obligation was calculated. No detail escaped administrative attention. This organization enabled rapid expansion. It mobilized enormous resources. It integrated diverse populations. It created unprecedented prosperity. The Sapa Inca stood at the apex. His authority was absolute. He was divine ruler, military commander, and high priest. His word was law. His decisions were final. He owned everything in the empire. Land, resources, and people belonged to him. Below the Inca, administration divided into hierarchies. The Inca's relatives formed the highest nobility. They were called Incas by blood. They held major positions. They governed quarters and provinces. They commanded armies. They controlled religious institutions. The broader nobility included Incas by privilege. These were ethnic Incas from Cusco. They had served with distinction. They received education and training. They filled administrative posts. They formed the bureaucratic backbone. Provincial nobles retained local authority. These cuirassas were hereditary leaders. They predated Inca conquest. The empire incorporated them. They collected tribute. They organized labor. They maintained order. They mediated between rulers and ruled. The decimal system organized population. Every 10 families had a leader. 10 of these formed a larger unit. This pattern continued upward. Leaders reported to higher levels. Information flowed up. Commands flowed down. At the base were household heads. They represented their families. They received work assignments. They distributed obligations. They reported problems. They were the interface with authority. Census taking was continuous. Officials counted everything. People, llamas, fields and storehouses. Ages and occupations were recorded. Births and deaths were tracked. This information guided decisions. The quipu system recorded data. Colored strings held information. Knots indicated numbers. Positions showed categories. Trained specialists maintained records. They could recreate entire censuses. Tribute obligations were precisely calculated. Each province owed specific goods. Coastal regions provided cotton and fish. Highlands supplied potatoes and wool. Forests contributed feathers and wood. Everyone contributed something. The Mita labor tax was fundamental. Adult men owed months of service. They might join military campaigns. They could work construction projects. They might transport goods. The state provided food and tools. Women's obligations centered on textiles. They wove specified amounts. Quality was strictly monitored. Fine cloth went to nobility. Common cloth equipped armies. Textiles were currency and diplomacy. Children and elderly had lighter duties. They scared birds from fields. They gathered wood and herbs. They watched younger children. Everyone contributed within ability. The Alu system remained foundational. These kinship groups predated the empire. They controlled specific territories. They worked land collectively. They supported members through reciprocity. Land tenure followed complex rules. The Inca owned all land theoretically, but usage rights were distributed. Each Alu had assigned fields. These were periodically redistributed. Population changes were accommodated. 3 categories divided land use. State land supported government. Religious lands maintained temples. Community lands fed populations. Each category was worked separately. Agricultural production was intensively managed. Officials determined what to plant. They specified quantities. They monitored growth. They supervised harvests. They controlled distribution. Storage facilities preserved surpluses. Thousands of kolkas dotted the landscape. They held food for emergencies. They supplied armies. They fed workers. They provided famine relief. Redistribution followed established patterns. Caracas received shares for distribution. Festivals featured public feasting. Workers on projects were fed. The elderly and disabled were supported. No one starved if they contributed. Craft production was specialized. Communities focused on particular items. Some villages made pottery, others wove textiles, some worked metal. This specialization increased efficiency. State workshops produced luxury goods. Master craftsmen created fine objects. Gold and silver were worked. Precious textiles were woven. These items served diplomatic purposes. Trade existed within limits. Local markets operated regularly. People exchanged surplus products. But long-distance trade was controlled. Merchants needed official permission. The state monopolized valuable goods. No currency existed traditionally. Barter was standard practice. Goods were exchanged directly. Value was negotiated individually. Some items served as standards. Textiles, cocoa, and peppers had recognized worth. The vertical archipelago maximized resources. Communities controlled lands at different elevations. They grew diverse crops. They reduced risk through diversification. Bad harvests in one zone were offset by others. Colonization expanded production. Micmac settlers were relocated strategically. They brought agricultural techniques. They established new production zones. They spread Inca culture. They secured frontiers. Infrastructure facilitated administration. Roads enabled rapid communication. Bridges connected regions. Tambos provided lodging. Chasqui runners carried messages. Information moved efficiently. Provincial capitals replicated Cusco. They contained administrative buildings. They had storage facilities. They included temples. They housed officials. They were miniature versions of the center. Legal systems maintained order. Laws were relatively simple. Theft, murder, and laziness were punished. Punishments were severe. Death was common for serious crimes. Public execution deterred others. Community responsibility was emphasized. If someone committed crimes, their Aelu suffered. This encouraged mutual surveillance. Social pressure maintained conformity. Individual freedom was sacrificed for order. Inspectors monitored compliance. They traveled throughout provinces. They verified census data. They checked tribute payments. They investigated complaints. They reported to Cusco. The Tokrikuk served as provincial governors. These were usually Inca nobles. They resided in provincial capitals. They supervised local administration. They commanded military forces. They represented imperial authority. Succession systems prevented instability. The Inca designated his heir. This was usually a son by the Koya, but competence mattered more than birth order. The chosen heir was carefully trained. The Panica system created complications. Each dead Inca's descendants formed a corporation. They maintained his mummy and estates. They competed for resources. New rulers needed new wealth. This drove expansion. Women held significant economic power. The Coya controlled extensive estates. Noble women managed properties. They supervised textile production. They participated in trade. They accumulated wealth independently. The Ekalawasi system concentrated female labour. Chosen women were selected young. They were trained in specialised skills. They wove finest textiles. They prepared ceremonial food. They served religious functions. Yanacona formed a separate class. These individuals were removed from Alis. They served the state directly. They might be craftsmen or administrators. They owed no mita service. They depended entirely on the state. Military service offered advancement. Successful warriors received rewards. They might gain land or titles. They could enter nobility. Their children received education. War was social mobility. Education was restricted to elites. The Yachaiwasi trained noble youth. They learned administration. They studied religion and history. They mastered quipu accounting. They practiced military arts. Language policy promoted unity. Quechua became administrative language. Officials had to speak it. Local languages persisted. But Quechua facilitated communication. It transcended ethnic boundaries. Religious integration reinforced political control. Local deities were incorporated. They became part of imperial pantheon. Their priests served under Inca supervision. Religious and political authority merged. Economic planning was sophisticated. Officials calculated resource needs. They determined production targets. They allocated labour accordingly. They monitored fulfillment. They adjusted as necessary. Emergency reserves provided security. Storehouses held years of food. They could supply armies. They could feed populations during drought. They could support massive projects. This planning prevented catastrophes. The system's efficiency was remarkable. Millions were fed and clothed. Massive projects were completed. Armies were supplied across vast distances. Administration functioned smoothly. The empire prospered. But rigidity was also weakness. Innovation was discouraged. Individual initiative was suppressed. Traditional methods dominated. Change came slowly. The system was vulnerable to disruption. External trade was minimal. The empire was largely self-sufficient. Ocean travel was limited. Mountain barriers restricted exchange. This isolation would prove fatal when Europeans arrived. Huayna Capac inherited an empire at its zenith. His father, Tupac Yupanqui, had expanded borders to their limits. The realm stretched from southern Colombia to central Chile. Millions of subjects obeyed Inca commands. Wealth flowed from every province. The empire seemed invincible. The new ruler faced different challenges than his predecessors. Expansion had reached natural boundaries. The Amazon jungle resisted penetration. The Mapuche prevented southern advance. Northern tribes fought ferociously. The empire needed consolidation, not conquest. Huayna Capac spent years in northern provinces. Quito became his second capital. He built palaces and temples there. He married local princesses. He integrated northern peoples. Some questioned whether he preferred Quito to Cusco. During these northern campaigns, strange reports arrived. Coastal peoples described floating houses. Bearded strangers had appeared briefly. They carried thunder sticks. They rode giant llamas. Then they disappeared northward. These were Spanish explorers probing southward. More disturbing were the diseases. A terrible plague swept through the empire. People developed fever and pustules. They died in enormous numbers. Entire villages were eliminated. The disease spread faster than understanding. This was smallpox introduced by Europeans. Huayna Capac himself fell ill around 1527. The disease ravaged his body. He died in Quito, far from Cusco. His designated heir, Ninancuyochi, had already died. The succession was suddenly uncertain. This ambiguity would prove catastrophic. Two sons claimed legitimacy. Huascar was born in Cusco. His mother was the Coya. Traditional law favoured him. He had support from Cusco nobility. The Panicas backed his claim. Atahualpa was born in the north. His mother was a Quito princess. He commanded northern armies. Veteran generals supported him. He controlled military resources. He had proven himself in battle. Initially, Huascar was recognized as Inca. He underwent coronation ceremonies in Cusco. He received the Machu Picchu fringe. Provincial governors acknowledged him. The empire seemed united under traditional succession, but tensions simmered beneath acceptance. Atahualpa remained in Quito with the army. He claimed his father had divided the empire. He would rule the north independently. Huascar rejected this arrangement absolutely. Personal animosity intensified political conflict. The brothers had always competed. Huascar was formal and traditional. Atahualpa was charismatic and military. Their personalities clashed fundamentally. Compromise became impossible. Huascar made critical mistakes early. He alienated the Panicas. He threatened to bury royal mummies. He wanted to seize their estates. This united opposition against him. Traditional supporters wavered. He also underestimated Atahualpa's strength. The northern armies were veterans. They had fought for years. They were loyal to their commanders. They were better equipped and trained. Huascar's forces were less experienced. The first conflicts were minor skirmishes. Border disputes escalated gradually. Each side tested the other. Neither wanted full civil war. Both hoped for negotiated settlement. But positions hardened over time. Atahualpa sent ambassadors to Cusco. They carried peace proposals. Huascar had them executed. He sent their skins back as drums. This insult made reconciliation impossible. War became inevitable. The conflict lasted approximately 5 years. Battles raged throughout the empire. Provinces chose sides. Old rivalries resurfaced. The unity carefully constructed over centuries shattered. Atahualpa's generals proved superior. Chalcuchima and Quisquis were brilliant commanders. They outmaneuvered Huascar's forces. They won battle after battle. They advanced steadily southward. The war's brutality shocked contemporaries. Entire populations were massacred. Cities were burned. Temples were desecrated. The violence exceeded anything previously known. Both sides committed atrocities. Huascar grew increasingly desperate. He conscripted anyone capable of fighting. He melted temple gold for payments. He executed suspected traitors. Paranoia consumed his court. Support eroded steadily. The climactic battle occurred near Cusco. Huascar personally led his army. He hoped to inspire victory through presence. The fighting was fierce. Neither side showed mercy. Atahualpa's forces prevailed decisively. Huascar was captured alive. His army dissolved. Cusco lay open. The northern forces occupied the capital. The civil war seemed over. But Atahualpa remained in the north. He didn't immediately travel to Cusco. Perhaps he consolidated control first. Maybe he performed religious ceremonies. This delay would prove fatal. Meanwhile, Francisco Pizarro had landed. The Spanish conquistador brought less than 200 men. They had horses, steel weapons, and guns. They also carried diseases. They possessed technological advantages. More importantly, they arrived during chaos. The empire was exhausted from civil war. Traditional structures were disrupted. The population was decimated by disease. Unity had been shattered. The timing was perfect for conquest. Pizarro learned about the civil war. He understood the opportunity. He marched inland toward Atahualpa. He sent friendly messages ahead. He claimed to come in peace. He requested a meeting. Atahualpa was in Cajamarca. This northern city had hot springs. He was celebrating victory. His army camped nearby. He felt completely secure. The strangers seemed insignificant. Intelligence about the Spanish was contradictory. They were few in number, but they had strange powers. They rode giant llamas. They possessed thunder weapons. Some thought they were gods. Others saw them as mere humans. Atahualpa decided to meet them. Curiosity motivated him partially. He also wanted to assess their threat. He would demonstrate his power. They would become vassals or die. His army guaranteed safety. He made a fatal miscalculation. He entered Cajamarca's plaza unarmed. He brought nobles and attendants. His army remained outside. He wanted to appear confident. He underestimated Spanish treachery. The Spanish had prepared carefully. They hid in buildings around the plaza. Cavalry waited in alleys. Cannons were positioned strategically. They planned ambush, not negotiation. A priest approached Atahualpa first. He carried a Bible. He demanded conversion to Christianity. He required submission to Spanish authority. Atahualpa rejected these demands. He threw down the Bible. This provided the pretext. Spanish forces attacked simultaneously. Guns fired into packed crowds. Cavalry charged through attendants. Steel swords cut down unarmed nobles. The plaza became a slaughter ground. Atahualpa's attendants tried protecting him. They used their bodies as shields. They died in hundreds, but they were unarmed. They couldn't fight steel weapons. The massacre was complete. Atahualpa was captured alive. Pizarro wanted him as hostage. The Inca's person was sacred. While he lived, resistance was paralyzed. No one could act without his orders. Outside Cajamarca, the army waited. They heard the gunfire. They saw smoke rising, but they couldn't act. Attacking might kill Atahualpa. The Spanish held absolute leverage. Atahualpa offered ransom for freedom. He would fill a room with gold. He would fill it twice with silver. The room was large. The ransom was enormous. The Spanish agreed to these terms. Orders went throughout the empire. Gold and silver were collected. Temples were stripped. Palaces were emptied. Caravans converged on Cajamarca. The ransom accumulated slowly. During captivity, Atahualpa learned about the Spanish. He discovered their motivations. They wanted gold above all. They were not gods. They were mortal men. But their weapons were superior. He also maintained authority from captivity. He ordered Huascar's execution. He feared his brother might ally with Spanish. He eliminated potential rivals. He tried managing the crisis. The Spanish grew impatient. Reinforcements had arrived. They now numbered several hundred. They wanted to advance toward Cusco. Atahualpa had become a liability. Accusations were manufactured against him. He was charged with murdering Huascar. He was accused of organizing resistance. He was condemned for idolatry. The trial was a mockery. On July 26, 1533, Atahualpa was executed. He was offered conversion to Christianity. This would change execution method. Strangulation replaced burning. He accepted baptism. He died as a Christian. His death created a power vacuum. No clear successor existed. Various generals claimed authority. The empire fragmented further. Spanish exploitation of divisions began immediately. The ransom was distributed among conquistadors. Each received enormous wealth. The gold was melted down. Artistic treasures were destroyed. Cultural patrimony was eliminated. Only metal value mattered. Pizarro marched toward Cusco. He met limited resistance. The empire was leaderless. Disease continued spreading. Traditional structures had collapsed. The conquest proceeded rapidly. Some Inca generals fought independently. Quisquis conducted guerrilla warfare. Rumiñahui defended Quito. But coordination was impossible. Each acted alone. They were gradually defeated. The Spanish installed puppet rulers. Tupac Hualpa was crowned briefly. He died within months. Manco Inca followed. He initially collaborated. He hoped to use Spanish against enemies. But Spanish abuses multiplied. They seized women. They stole everything valuable. They destroyed religious sites. They enslaved populations. They showed no respect. The civil war had weakened the empire fatally. Brothers had fought brothers. Traditional authority was destroyed. Military forces were divided. Disease had decimated populations. Unity was shattered permanently. When the Spanish arrived, they found perfect conditions. The empire was vulnerable. Leadership was contested. Structures were disrupted. Resistance was fragmented. Conquest became possible. The tragedy was largely self-inflicted. If succession had been clear, unity might have persisted. If brothers had cooperated, defense was possible. If disease hadn't struck, strength remained. But multiple catastrophes coincided. The Civil War was the beginning of the end. It created the conditions for Spanish conquest. It destroyed what ancestors had built. It ended indigenous independence. It changed history forever. Manco Inca initially believed he could use the Spanish. These strange allies had eliminated Atahualpa's faction. They had restored Cusco to traditional rulers. He would be the legitimate Inca. They would be his military support. Together they would rebuild the empire. This illusion shattered quickly. The Spanish treated him as a puppet. They demanded gold constantly. They took women freely. They destroyed sacred sites. They showed contempt for everything Inca. Manco realized he had miscalculated terribly. Spanish abuses multiplied daily. Conquistadors seized palaces for themselves. They melted religious artifacts. They tortured nobles for hidden treasure. They enslaved commoners for labor. They acted as conquerors, not allies. The rape of the Coya was unforgivable. Spanish soldiers assaulted Manco's wife. This violated every sacred principle. The Inca's person was divine. His family was untouchable. This insult demanded response. Manco began planning rebellion secretly. He contacted provincial generals. He gathered weapons quietly. He recruited warriors carefully. He waited for the right moment. Patience was essential. The opportunity came in 1536. Francisco Pizarro was in Lima. Many Spanish had dispersed seeking gold. Cusco's garrison was reduced. Manco requested permission to perform ceremonies. He left the city with followers. Once free, he raised the banner of rebellion. Warriors flocked to his cause. Years of Spanish abuse had created universal hatred. The uprising spread rapidly. Thousands joined the resistance. The siege of Cusco began in May 1536. Inca forces surrounded the city. They numbered in tens of thousands. They cut off food supplies. They diverted water sources. They intended to starve the Spanish out. The Spanish defended desperately. They were fewer than 200. But they had horses and steel. They occupied fortified buildings. They launched cavalry charges. They barely survived. Inca forces used new tactics. They dug pits to trap horses. They used captured Spanish weapons. They fought at night to neutralize cavalry. They set fires to burn defenders out. They learned from their enemies. The fighting was brutal. The Incas recaptured Sacsayhuaman fortress. They rained projectiles on the city below. Spanish counterattacks were repulsed repeatedly. Victory seemed possible, but Spanish advantages gradually told. Their armor deflected most weapons. Their horses provided mobility. Their steel swords were devastating. Small numbers could defeat larger forces. Technology trumped numbers. Reinforcements arrived from Lima. Fresh Spanish troops broke through Inca lines. They brought supplies and weapons. The siege began failing. Manco's forces couldn't maintain pressure. After 10 months, the siege collapsed. Inca armies melted away. Many warriors needed to plant crops. Others lost faith in victory. The moment had passed. Cusco remained in Spanish hands. Manco retreated to Vilcabamba. This remote region northwest of Cusco became his refuge. Mountains and jungles provided protection. Spanish horses couldn't operate effectively. The terrain favored defenders. In Vilcabamba, Manco established a government in exile. He maintained Inca traditions. He appointed officials. He conducted ceremonies. He preserved what he could. The empire continued in miniature. From this base, he conducted guerrilla warfare. Raiders attacked Spanish convoys. They burned settlements. They freed prisoners. They killed isolated Spaniards. They made occupation costly. The Spanish tried negotiating. They offered Manco territories and titles. They promised autonomy under Spanish sovereignty. They guaranteed religious freedom. Manco rejected everything. Independence was non-negotiable. Military expeditions against Vilcabamba failed. The jungle was impenetrable. Diseases weakened Spanish forces. Inca knowledge of terrain was absolute. Ambushes were constant. The expeditions retreated in failure. Manco ruled in Vilcabamba until 1544. Spanish refugees had joined him earlier. They had fled from conquistador conflicts. Manco had sheltered them. This kindness proved fatal. The refugees murdered Manco during a game. They hoped to gain pardons. They stabbed him repeatedly. The Inca died from treachery. His young son, Sayri Tupac, succeeded him. Sayri Tupac faced impossible choices. The Spanish Empire was consolidating. More colonists arrived yearly. Military resistance seemed hopeless. Accommodation might preserve something. In 1558 he negotiated with Spanish authorities. He would leave Vilcabamba peacefully. He would receive estates and titles. He would become a Spanish noble. Some saw this as betrayal. Others understood the pragmatism. Sayri Tupac died mysteriously in 1561. Poison was suspected but unproven. His death created another succession crisis. His brother Titu Cusi assumed power in Vilcabamba. Titu Cusi pursued dual strategies. He negotiated with Spanish authorities, but he also maintained independence. He allowed Christian missionaries to enter, but he preserved Inca religion. He played for time. During his reign, accommodation increased. Trade occurred between Vilcabamba and Spanish territories. Some Incas accepted Christianity. Cultural exchange began. The boundaries softened gradually. Titu Cusi died suddenly in 1571. Another brother, Tupac Amaru, became the last Inca. He was young and inexperienced. He had lived isolated from Spanish contact. He represented traditional resistance. The new Spanish viceroy, Francisco de Toledo, decided to end Vilcabamba. This independent Inca state embarrassed colonial authority. Its existence inspired resistance. It had to be eliminated. A major expedition was organized in 1572. Thousands of soldiers participated. They had indigenous allies. They knew the routes. They were determined to succeed. The invasion of Vilcabamba was methodical. Spanish forces advanced slowly but steadily. They built bridges. They cleared paths. They established supply lines. They overcame each obstacle. Inca resistance crumbled quickly. The population was small. Warriors were few. Spanish military superiority was overwhelming. Vilcabamba's defences were breached. Tupac Amaru fled into the jungle. He tried escaping downriver, but pursuit was relentless. He was captured after weeks. The last independent Inca was in Spanish hands. He was brought to Cusco for trial. The charges were rebellion and murder. The trial was predetermined. Guilt was assumed. The sentence was death. On September 24, 1572, Tupac Amaru was executed. Thousands of indigenous people watched. They wept openly. He spoke to them in Quechua. He proclaimed his innocence. He died with dignity. His death ended organized Inca resistance. Vilcabamba was abandoned. The Neo-Inca state ceased existing. Spanish authority was unchallenged. The conquest was complete. But resistance continued in other forms. Religious practices went underground. Inca symbols were hidden in Christian art. Quechua language persisted. Oral histories were preserved. Culture survived despite suppression. Periodic rebellions erupted over centuries. In 1742, Juan Santos Atahualpa claimed Inca descent. He led an uprising in the jungle. He was never defeated. His rebellion inspired others. The greatest rebellion came in 1780. Tupac Amaru II claimed royal descent. He led massive uprising. Hundreds of thousands participated. The rebellion nearly succeeded. Spanish response was brutal. Tupac Amaru II was executed grotesquely. His family was killed. Thousands were massacred. Quechua language was banned. Inca symbols were forbidden. Yet memory persisted. Stories passed through generations. Pride in Inca achievement remained. Identity survived oppression. The empire was gone but not forgotten. Spanish colonialism transformed everything. European diseases killed millions. The encomienda system enslaved survivors. Silver mines consumed lives. Traditional society was destroyed. Christianity replaced indigenous religion. Churches were built on temple foundations. Saints replaced traditional deities. But syncretism occurred. Indigenous beliefs merged with Christianity. The meter labor system was perverted. Spanish authorities demanded mine workers. Entire communities were depopulated. Men died in thousands. The system became deadly exploitation. Reducciones concentrated scattered populations. Indigenous peoples were forced into Spanish-style towns. Traditional settlement patterns were destroyed. Social structures were disrupted. Control was facilitated. Spanish became the official language. Indigenous languages were suppressed. Education occurred in Spanish. Government functioned in Spanish. Native tongues retreated to rural areas. Yet Quechua survived and spread. It remained the common language. More people speak it today than during the empire. It carries cultural memory. It maintains identity. The demographic catastrophe was staggering. Pre-conquest population was perhaps 12 million. By 1620, maybe 1 million survived. 90% had died, mostly from disease. Recovery took centuries. Population slowly increased. Mestizae created new identities. Indigenous and European merged. Modern Andean culture emerged. It combines both heritages. The Inca legacy persists today. Agricultural techniques continue. Terraces still produce food. Irrigation systems still function. Potato varieties are still cultivated. Social organization maintains elements. Elu structures survive in communities. Reciprocity governs rural relations. Communal labor builds infrastructure. Traditional practices persist. The empire's fall was not inevitable. Different decisions might have changed outcomes. United resistance could have succeeded. Earlier Spanish contact might have built immunity. History has no predetermined path. The Spanish conquest succeeded through multiple factors. Technology provided military advantages. Disease weakened resistance. Civil war destroyed unity. Collaboration facilitated control. Timing was crucial. The Incas were not passive victims. They fought courageously. They adapted tactics. They preserved culture. They maintained dignity. They resisted until the end. Their empire lasted barely a century, but their achievements endure forever. They built impossibilities. They organized millions. They created prosperity. They left monuments to human capability. The story of their fall is tragedy, but the story of their rise is inspiration. From small kingdom to vast empire. From obscurity to glory, from nothing to everything, then back to memory. Today millions claim Inca heritage. They speak Quechua proudly. They maintain traditions. They remember ancestors. They honor the past. The empire is gone. The people remain. Machu Picchu stands as testament. Tourists marvel at its beauty. They wonder at its construction. They feel its power. It survived because it was hidden. It represents what was lost. Archaeological discoveries continue. New sites are found regularly. Each adds understanding. The picture becomes clearer. The achievement becomes more impressive. Appreciation grows. The Inca Empire was the largest in pre-Columbian America. It was among the largest in world history. It was created without writing, without wheels, without iron, through human effort alone. Its fall reminds us of fragility. Great civilizations can disappear. Power is temporary. Achievement is vulnerable. Nothing lasts forever. Everything ends eventually. But its existence inspires hope. Humans can achieve greatly. Organization can create prosperity. Cooperation can build monuments. Intelligence can overcome obstacles. Determination can move mountains. The Incas proved what was possible. They showed human potential. They demonstrated collective achievement. They left lessons for posterity. They remind us to build, to create, to achieve, to remember. Their story is our story. Human ambition and human failure, human greatness and human weakness, human achievement and human loss, the eternal human drama, forever fascinating, forever instructive, forever inspiring. The sun still rises over Cusco. It illuminates ancient walls. It warms modern inhabitants. It connects past and present. The Inca's father continues his journey. The empire is gone. The sun remains. The story continues. This is the complete story of the Inca civilization, from mythical origins to tragic end, from small kingdom to vast empire, from glory to destruction, from memory to inspiration, the greatest indigenous empire in American history, built by human hands, destroyed by human conflict, remembered by human hearts. Their legacy transcends stone monuments and golden artifacts. It lives in the terraced mountainsides, still feeding Andean communities. It flows through irrigation channels, watering fields 5 centuries after construction. It echoes in Quechua words spoken by millions. The Inca Empire ended, but its contributions to human civilization endure. Modern Peru embraces this heritage proudly. The rainbow flag of Tawantinsuyu flies beside national banners. School children learn about Pachacuti and Tupac Yupanqui. Museums display recovered treasures. Archaeological sites draw international visitors. The past informs present identity. Indigenous communities maintain ancestral practices. They perform ceremonies at mountain shrines. They make offerings to Pachamama before planting. They work through Aini reciprocity. They weave patterns passed through generations. Living culture connects to ancient roots. The agricultural legacy feeds the world. Potatoes originated in the Andes. The Incas developed hundreds of varieties. They created frost-resistant types. They bred for different altitudes. These varieties spread globally. Potatoes became staple food worldwide. Quinoa was another Inca crop. This protein-rich grain grew at high altitudes. It survived harsh conditions. Modern health consciousness rediscovered it. Now quinoa grows on multiple continents. Ancient wisdom feeds modern populations. Freeze-drying technology preceded modern methods by centuries. Chuño preserved potatoes indefinitely. The process removed moisture completely. No refrigeration was needed. This technique inspired modern food preservation. Ancient innovation influenced contemporary practice. Terrace agriculture remains viable. Modern farmers still use Inca terraces. They produce crops on vertical terrain. They prevent erosion effectively. They create microclimates. They demonstrate sustainable farming. Environmental challenges make these techniques relevant again. The road system influences modern infrastructure. Many highways follow Inca routes. The paths were expertly chosen. They found optimal grades. They avoided unstable areas. They connected efficiently. Modern engineers respect ancient planning. Administrative innovations offer lessons. The decimal organization system managed millions. The Mita labor tax mobilized workforces. The storage system prevented famine. The redistribution network ensured welfare. These concepts inform development strategies. The Ailu structure influences rural organization. Extended families still share resources. Communities work collectively on projects. Reciprocal obligations bind neighbors. Social safety nets function without government intervention. Traditional systems prove resilient. Architectural techniques inspire modern builders. Seismic-resistant construction saves lives. Interlocking stones withstand earthquakes. Trapezoidal openings dissipate energy. Ancient solutions address contemporary problems. Engineers study Inca methods. The quipu system intrigues researchers. These knotted cords encoded information. They recorded numbers, certainly. They may have captured narratives. Computer scientists see parallels with binary code. Ancient information technology awaits full decipherment. Textile traditions continue thriving. Andean weavers create stunning fabrics. They use natural dyes. They employ ancient patterns. They encode cultural meaning. Museums and collectors prize these works. Living art connects past and present. The vertical archipelago concept influences development planning. Communities still control multiple ecological zones. They diversify production. They spread risk. They maximize resources. This strategy ensures resilience. Religious syncretism shapes modern spirituality. Catholic saints merged with mountain spirits. Christian festivals incorporated indigenous ceremonies. Churches stand on temple foundations. Dual religious systems coexist. Cultural blending created unique traditions. Language preservation maintains identity. Quechua speakers number millions. The language adapts to modern needs. New words describe technology. Old words preserve worldviews. Language carries cultural DNA. Music echoes through centuries. Panpipes and drums continue sounding. Ancient melodies persist in folk songs. Festivals feature traditional performances. Cultural expression maintains continuity. Sound connects generations. Tourism brings global attention. Machu Picchu attracts millions annually. The Inca Trail challenges hikers. Sacred Valley tours educate visitors. Economic benefits flow to communities. The past generates present prosperity. Archaeological discoveries expand knowledge. New sites emerge regularly. Technology reveals hidden structures. Satellite imagery identifies ruins. Ground-penetrating radar exposes foundations. Each finding adds understanding. DNA studies trace population movements. Genetic analysis confirms oral histories. Migration patterns become clear. Relationships between groups emerge. Science validates tradition. Biology supports mythology. Climate research uses Inca records. Ice cores correlate with historical events. Tree rings confirm droughts. Lake sediments reveal changes. Ancient observations inform climate science. The past helps predict the future. Social movements invoke Inca imagery. Indigenous rights campaigns use symbols. Political parties claim inheritance. Protests demand recognition. History becomes political tool, memory motivates action. Education incorporates indigenous knowledge. Universities teach Quechua. Schools include Inca history. Traditional medicine gains respect. Indigenous law influences legislation. Knowledge systems gain validation. International recognition grows. UNESCO protects heritage sites. Museums worldwide display artifacts. Scholars study achievements. Documentaries spread awareness. Global appreciation increases. The Inca example inspires solutions. Sustainable agriculture becomes urgent. Community organization addresses inequality. Traditional knowledge offers alternatives. Ancient wisdom seems modern. Old answers address new questions. Environmental lessons prove valuable. The Incas managed resources carefully. They prevented soil erosion. They conserved water. They maintained biodiversity. They balanced human needs with nature. Modern crises make these approaches relevant. The empire's rapid rise demonstrates possibility, from regional kingdom to continental power in 3 generations, without writing or wheels. Through organization and determination, human potential was proven. Its fall warns about vulnerability. Internal division enables external conquest. Disease can destroy civilizations. Technology provides decisive advantages. Unity is essential for survival. Hubris invites catastrophe. The resistance story inspires pride. Manco Inca fought against odds. Vilcabamba maintained independence. Tupac Amaru died with dignity. Later rebellions continued struggles. Defeat was not submission. Cultural survival demonstrates resilience. Despite centuries of suppression, languages persisted. Traditions continued, identity remained, memory endured, culture proved indestructible. The Inca legacy belongs to humanity, not just Peru or South America, but the entire world. It shows what humans can achieve. It demonstrates organizational genius. It proves environmental harmony possible. Modern challenges require Inca solutions. Climate change demands adaptation. Inequality needs addressing. Resources require management. Communities need organization. Ancient wisdom offers guidance. The story continues evolving. New discoveries emerge. Fresh interpretations develop. Modern relevance increases. The past speaks to present. History lives in contemporary times. Every sunrise over Machu Picchu reminds us, human achievement transcends time. Great works outlast creators. Beauty survives destruction. Memory defeats oblivion. Legacy is immortality. The Incas built more than empire. They created systems. They developed techniques. They established principles. They left examples. They provided inspiration. They demonstrated capacity. Their 1,000-year journey from obscurity to glory to memory teaches patience. Civilizations rise slowly. They fall quickly. They echo forever. Time judges achievement. History records truth. We study them to understand ourselves, our potential for greatness, our capacity for failure, our ability to endure, our need for meaning, our desire for legacy. The Inca story is human story. Ambition and accomplishment, cooperation and conflict, creation and destruction, memory and forgetting, past and present, forever intertwined. As long as mountains stand, as long as rivers flow, as long as humans remember, the Inca achievement endures, in stone and story, in practice and principle, in pride and inspiration. The empire conquered territories, but its true conquest was imagination. It showed what was possible. It expanded human horizons. It lifted expectations. It set standards. It created dreams. Today's children in Cusco play among Inca walls. They speak Spanish and Quechua. They use smartphones near ancient stones. They embody continuity. Past and present merge. The story continues. Tomorrow's archaeologists will discover more. Technology will reveal secrets. Understanding will deepen. Appreciation will grow. The Inca achievement will seem greater. Time increases rather than diminishes their stature. The sun sets over Sacsayhuaman. Shadows lengthen across perfect stonework. Tourist buses depart. Local families remain. Night falls on the empire. But morning always comes. The sun returns, as it always has, as it always will. This is their true legacy. Not gold or silver, not even stones or roads, but the proof of human possibility, the demonstration of collective achievement, the inspiration for future greatness, the reminder that we can build wonders. The Inca Empire lasted 100 years. Its legacy will last forever, as long as humans dream. As long as we build, as long as we remember, the Incas live. Their story ends here, but their influence continues. In every terraced field, in every Quechua word, in every tourist's wonder, in every scholar's study, in every dreamer's ambition. The greatest empire in pre-Columbian America, built without wheels, without writing, without iron, built with human hands, human minds, human hearts, human will. Gone but not forgotten, conquered but not defeated, ended but not erased, the Inca civilization, forever part of human heritage, forever inspiring human achievement, forever reminding us what we can accomplish, together.